So in this lesson summary, we're going to go over the symptoms of anxiety as such, and we're going to look at it from a neurobiological point of view as well, briefly. So a reminder, the tutorial is for educational purposes only. Tutorial is not designed as a diagnostic or treat anyone to make any recommendations. That learners deploy the techniques as part of a treatment plan. The tutorial is strictly for educational purposes only. So the locus serolius part of the brain receives signals from the amygdala and initiates the anxiety response. And that's where we get the blood pressure, change elevation, heart rate elevation, and sort of pupils as well. So just think of a situation where you felt anxious, for example, and you can sort of briefly think back to that. We've all had times we felt anxious with an exam or presentation, interview, and just think about how heart rate starts to go a little bit quicker and so on and so forth. And from a neuro point of view, the amygdala part of the brain pre-screens for danger. It gets information from the hippocampus, which stores past dangerous events. Well, it's the memory center. The hippocampus, briefly, is the memory center. It stores raw info from your senses along with emotional data from the amygdala. Now, the amygdala is activated by the hypothalamus part of the brain to trigger the fear response in the body. And the amygdala is important as well. Amygdala deactivates the rational brain. So that probably explains why we don't sort of act rationally, or you see certain sports people under extreme, say if they're in pressure, they've got to do a penalty for a big final. We kind of don't see them act rationally, or sort of they go back to type. And so the fear anxiety is triggered primarily through your senses. So sight is the first process through the thalamus, filtering incoming data and sending it to the amygdala or the cortex. Smell is the only sense that goes straight to the amygdala. It passes the thalamus. But significantly here, the incoming senses associated with the threat in the amygdala, whether it's really imagined, anticipated, past, present, or immediately processed to trigger the fear response. So the glands release active chemicals called hormones, and these are active molecules which create emotions and moods. Now, the hypothalamus and pituitary, before you can consciously process the fear, the hypothalamus and pituitary gland cause the adrenal glands to pump out high levels of cortisol, of stress hormones. So, for example, if we've sort of been cut up on the road, or we've sort of had a response, we can sort of feel, jittery, significantly past the experience. And I think also a point of consideration is that the anxiety kind of hits us pretty quickly, and we probably want it to go as quickly as it can. But once the neurobiology kicks into action, and it kind of sets a cascade of events. And so high levels of cortisol short circuits the cells, according to research at hippocampus, making it challenging to organize memory of traumatic experience. Therefore, the memories lose context and become fragmented. So when the sympathetic nervous system kicks in, there's a good chance that we experience heart rate going up, blood pressure changes, hyperventilation, hypervigilance, goosebumps, hyper alert. We may freeze for a moment. Adrenaline pumps to the muscles in high volume to prepare to fight or flight, or we freeze. And the brain turns its attention away from digestion, for example, and the tracts can potentially empty as well in that response. So, and it's only after the fear response that's activated does the conscious mind kick in, the sort of conscious appraisal. So some of the incoming sensory info goes through to the cortex, and the cortex decides whether the info deserves a fear response or if it's a genuine threat. So it's kind of like this sort of tennis match, a bit like, for example, say if, for example, you hear a knock on the door in the early hours of the morning, so you sort of first response, and then you kind of think, well, it could be your partner coming back home from the evening, or and you sort of walk down, or perhaps you hear the stairs, perhaps you hear like some dishes bang in the kitchen, and as you're walking down, you think, well, has someone broken in? Or as you walk down, you kind of think, well, actually, I might have left a dish hanging over the edge, and as you sort of walk down, you've got this sort of tennis match with the cortex and the more primal structures of the brain, until eventually the conscious mind kicks in, and okay, well, you sort of see the plate on the floor and you realize you left that hanging over the edge, so to speak, and there's like agreement. But still, even after that, you sort of still have that sort of those feelings with the release of cortisol as well. So that's sort of a bit of a brief overview of the symptoms and how they relate to the neurobiology. Gives a little bit more depth of understanding of what